Hi, it's Dr. Noel Williams, Optimal Health Associates, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, June 26th, 2022. Haven't done one in a month. I think we'll start doing them a little more again because, COVID's rearing its ugly head. Again, not super bad stuff. We're having about 100,000 reported cases a day. In the United States, it's probably several 100,000. We're having about 300 deaths a day. Last summer, when we were having 10,000 cases a day, we were having about a little higher number generally of deaths. So it just illustrates that Omicron, while very, very infectious and very, very prevalent, and these are the subvariants, it's nowhere near as deadly. The key thing to keep in mind about the Omicron variants is they are different than what we've had before. And so standard approaches that we did before don't work. So none of the antivirals work. We don't use ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. Paxlovid does not work. It does not work. Do not take it. It does not work. It doesn't work. That's what the data is showing. Do not take it if your doctor offers it to you. It just has risks. That's my opinion, but find a paper that shows it works, just like find a paper that shows getting a booster vaccine in someone under 6 that there's any data showing it works. There's none. I'll post a slide from Dr. Prasad about that out of Stanford. So again, the core things with COVID come down to your mitochondria and your immune system. So what happens? We get more and more understanding all the time. This is a disease of nutritional deficiency, period. That's what it is. That is how it works. And so if you are nutritionally depleted, you are at significant risk of getting really sick. Most of the time you're not going to with Omicron, but you still are at more risk. Why? You have 2 different types of immunity. You have immunity through your T cell side and your antibody side, and there's cell-mediated immunity and adaptive. I'm not going to go into that, but just in terms of that, you have T cells that can go kill something, and you have antibodies that can be generated to affect and destroy viral particles. So Fauci has talked about the antibody side, because Fauci is always talking about the things that matter least. And so what happens is your T1 helper cells need to be revved up because they're your T cell-sided immunity, okay? Your T2 helper cells are your antibody side. And so as you get nutritionally depleted, your mitochondrial effects and cells change. And so what happens is your T cell immunity goes down and your B cell immunity goes higher. And the B cell immunity is what goes crazy and causes cytokine storm and causes the problems. So as we look at this stuff again, it's nutrition. So in the center of the cell, so imagine a pumpkin pie and you have whipped cream in the middle, and we're going to say that's a nucleus, but then you have another spot of whipped cream somewhere else, or several, or we'll say pecans in the pumpkin pie or something. Those are the mitochondria. Oxygen goes into the mitochondria, something comes down into the mitochondria called NAD, which is nicotinamide acid, and then in a mishmash of B vitamins, iodine, zinc, cortisol, DHEA, hormones, yes, hormones matter, which we've talked about, you end up making energy or ATPs in the mitochondria that come out. You have to have the right things in there. So if you're a poor oxygenator because you've been a smoker, that's not going to make your mitochondria work very well. If you are overeating all the time, your NAD levels are going to be lower. If you're nutritionally unrepleted, you never take vitamins, you don't eat vegetables, you don't do any of that, the center of your mitochondria don't work, which is why people get sicker with COVID. And so it always, as we go through this path again and again, it is just ultimately a poor immune system that is the main culprit. Now, yes, COVID elevates the risk for blood clot and other things, so it's a little more involved, but the vast majority of problems with COVID have to do with overinflammation and your own body damaging you. So the simple solution is to stay nutritionally repleted, and then if you get COVID, let your provider know, and hopefully they'll be smart enough to treat you with some steroids to turn down inflammation and an antibiotic, because half the people who get hospitalized or more have a secondary bacterial infection with just normal bacteria like strep or staph or E. coli or mycoplasma or ureaplasm, all this very straightforward stuff. So COVID isn't changing in terms of the pathophys other than it's weaker, but the same stuff that's been going on is still going on. It's nutrition. Then let's talk vaccination. Do I feel there's any role for boosters? Absolutely, positively not. Period. There's no good data to support it. Supposedly there's data, but again, it's not good data. We know that there's data out of Great Britain, data out of Helsinki, showing that if you're more boosted, you're more likely to get Omicron. So you can do that research yourself, but it's the God's honest truth. The other thing is, I see lots and lots of people wearing masks still when you're traveling. Masks do nothing. I'm totally on board if people want to wear masks, because if it makes them feel comfortable because they're being performative, I think, if that's what you want to do, but just get it in your head, the mask doesn't work. It's like having a chain link fence trying to stop a gnat, and that's really even not a good enough analogy, because the viral particle is even smaller than the gnat relatively to the chain link fence. So it doesn't matter. That's been shown. There's actually interesting older data that Fauci actually was author on that shows that wearing masks chronically increases your risk for bacterial infection, but somehow he always forgets that. But that's here nor there. And yes, I'm always going to rant about Fauci, because Fauci is the center of all bad medicine, destructive choices, and everything. Like, follow the science. We don't follow the science in the United States. We haven't followed the science forever with COVID. We gave up the science. So, that's just how it is. Kim, any other comments? I'm going to make some other posts. I'm not going to talk all that much about, or almost at all, about the Roe Wade thing. As a women's health advocate, I think that I will post the actual decision from the Supreme Court. If you read it through, like I have 3 times, you will see what they based their decision on. You'll have to make your own decisions on if you thought it was reasonable or not reasonable, in terms of some key suppositions they made. That one, was not discriminatory against women. That's something that you just have to read and decide yourself. They obviously decided it was not. There's some other issues with precedent and bad legal language in both Roe Wade and Casey, which I was not aware of, but very badly written findings, unfortunately. So very, very interesting stuff. The dissent side is underwhelming in terms of trying to defend Roe Wade. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with the decision. I'm just saying, as an intelligent person who can read legal briefs, the dissent side was incredibly weak, which is confusing. But so I don't think the summary is, though, that anything with Roe Wade being overturned has anything to do with gay marriage, birth control, whether African Americans can get married to Caucasians, because keep in mind, all this was at one point against the law. But, and they're very, very clear in the ruling that this is specific to abortion and not specific in any way, shape, or form to any other social issue. And you just need to read their whole thing to understand where they're coming from. And again, not agreeing or disagreeing, just presenting it for everyone to make their own decision on whether this was the right or wrong thing for the country. But again, that's why we have to go out and vote, and that's why we have to, support the people who represent us. So I hope, does that sound politically middle of the road enough, Kim?
Yeah.
I was under very strict instructions not to get too fired up about it, but I do want to say there's going to be a lot of media stuff, and there's just not the decision or the whatever you call it is not. It's very clear that those other liberties or freedoms are not affected in any way, shape, or form on that. This is specific only to the reasoning for Roe Wade.
Okay.
But we hate to live in interesting times, and unfortunately we continue to live in interesting times. So anyway, take care and good night.